I'm Phil Brown. I'm the Bird Conservation Director at the Harris Center for Conservation Education. And it's a beautiful evening here in the Monadnock region. Flowers are blooming, birds are singing. It's just a wonderful time to be outside. And we thank you for those of us who are joining us this evening, as it was hard to pull ourselves away from the outdoor worlds, but it's good to see many of you here. We're here to hear from Chad Witko from National Audubon Society. And Chad's going to be speaking about migratory bird conservation tonight. But first, I'll introduce the Harris Center a little bit here. The Harris Center for Conservation Education is a nonprofit organization based in the Monadnock region of Southwest New Hampshire. We connect people to nature and help them fall in love with the natural world. And we do that through land conservation, conducting research on our lands and species around the region, and providing education to people of all ages. And as a land trust, we've protected over 25,000 acres of land, and much of that is open to hiking, birding, and lots more. We coordinate research and education on these lands and around the region. And our educators are a steady presence in schools throughout the region. Many kids have grown up with Harris Center staff, providing education to them in schools. And we also offer well over 100 programs per year at this point to people of all ages. This includes guided hikes, film showings, and lots of different types of presentations, both in person and over Zoom. So tonight, we're really fortunate to hear from our friend and conservation colleague, Chad Witko of National Audubon Society. And Chad's going to be speaking about the organization's Migratory Bird Initiative. And he's going to demonstrate the new Bird Migration Explorer platform, which is a tool that is sure to connect you with birds even better than you are now. So a little bit about Chad. Chad is the Senior Coordinator of Avian Biology for the National Audubon Society's Migratory Bird Initiative. Before working at Audubon to help secure the future of migratory birds in the Western Hemisphere, Chad worked on various avian research, conservation, and education projects across the United States, since working for Project Puffin in 2004. A lifelong birder with strong bird identification and distribution knowledge, Chad has served as an eBird reviewer and seasonal editor for New Hampshire Bird Records. As an ornithologist, he's most interested in migration, patterns of vagrancy, and seabirds. As a birder, Chad believes in community engagement and is the founder of the Antioch Bird Club. He currently lives in southeastern Vermont with his partner and daughter. And I might also add that Chad is a past raptor biologist at the Harris Center's own Monadnock Raptor Observatory, and a former Harris Center intern. So we're extra proud to see how his career has continued to take shape. So welcome to Chad. I'll turn it over to you now, so you can talk about the tool and help us interact with migration in a whole new way.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I appreciate that very warm welcome. I'm going to share my screen. So tonight, for everybody in attendance, the evening will be a hybrid kind of presentation where I will show you a slideshow to introduce you to the Migratory Bird Initiative, as well as our Bird Migration Explorer. And then I will, do my best with the time that's available to demonstrate the Bird Migration Explorer, so you'll have the confidence and the wherewithal to feel comfortable using this tool. So I'm going to share my screen now. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. There's certainly no better time than perhaps this week to talk about migratory birds. I saw some folks putting in the chat their favorite, migratory birds they might have seen recently this week. I will say that I missed out this evening on an apparent scarlet tanager that was coming down to our feeders, surprisingly, while I was on another meeting. So those birds are coming back and are one of my favorites. A little bit about myself. Phil touched upon this, so I won't expound on this too long. I'm a lifelong birder from the Hudson Valley of New York originally, although I've traveled around the country working in different states on both coasts, working with birds. Most recently, I've lived in Vermont and now, Vermont and then previously in New Hampshire. I am also the founder of the Antioch Bird Club, and I know there's some ties to the region So if any of you have interacted with the Antioch Bird Club, I am so appreciative of where that has gone. And I am also a science advisor for BirdNote. So if anybody's ever listened to BirdNote, I have the fortune of being able to help shape some of those programs. So talking about the Migratory Bird Initiative, well, where do we start? The first thing to say is, unfortunately, migratory birds are being lost at an alarming rate. There's a paper that came out in 2019 in Science from Rosenberg and others that describes the loss of nearly 3 billion birds from our landscape since 1970. For many of us on this call, that is within our lifetime. And of those 3 billion birds, nearly 2.5 billion of those birds are migratory. And on top of that, Audubon's own Survival by Degrees report, published this, produced the same year and published in 2020, details how 389 species of birds are on the brink of extinction or some type of massive range shift due to climate change if we do not act now. So, as I said, birds are being lost at an alarming rate. 3/4 of our bird species in the US and Canada are migratory. Again, 2.5 billion birds lost since 1970. And the climate science that we are looking at shows us that the future is not bright for many of these same species unless we act. So why do we study birds? Well, birds are telling us about the health of our environment, not only where we live, but across the hemisphere. Many of our migratory birds are traveling great distances through the Americas. The same is happening across the globe. Birds are coming out of Europe and Asia, streaming through Africa, Australasia. These birds are world global travelers, and they are telling us about the health of the environment wherever they go. They're the proverbial canary in the coal mine. This is something that unfortunately is easy to study, but some of the results are a bit alarming. So by protecting birds and the places they need, the good news is we can also protect the places that people need and that other wildlife need. By protecting birds, we enable us to have cleaner water, air, wild spaces that benefit birds, wildlife, and humans alike. But protecting migratory birds requires us to work together across the hemisphere. As I said, more than half of the migratory bird species we see in our communities spend more than half of their year outside of the United States. We often like to think of these as our birds because we have that bias of seeing them in our backyard. But the truth is that these are a shared experience, a shared resource. And these birds are traveling many, many miles over borders through hemispheres. And to protect them and the places they need, we need to think about addressing the challenges that these birds are facing on their breeding grounds, along with their non-breeding grounds, their stopover sites, and all the migratory routes in between. So looking at this example here, we see a map of Swainson's hawk migrations that is taken directly from our Bird Migration Explorer. Now, these birds are breeding widely across the American West. They migrate through the narrow corridors through places like Mexico, Central America, and then they're flying all the way down to one region in South America known as the Pampas, primarily in Argentina. These are some of the longest migrations of any raptor in the world. And as you can see, in order to protect Swainson's hawks and birds like them, we need to think about having a hemispheric approach through all of these areas. So fortunately, advances in migration science and technology help us to understand that bird migration is a wonderful thing, and it is something that we can study and protect. And using the science that we have available today, we can understand more about it for more impactful conservation. Here's a photo of a red-eyed vireo that has a transmitter having been just applied. So what is our vision? Well, Audubon's Migratory Bird Initiative was launched in 2018 with the vision of securing migratory birds across the Western Hemisphere. To do this requires working on 4 primary fronts. These include identifying the places that migratory birds need to thrive across the Americas, protecting those places that matter most, reducing threats, and of course, programs like tonight, engaging people in the wonder of migration. And the Bird Migration Explorer does just that. So the Migratory Bird Initiative, to do this work, consolidates millions of data shared by hundreds of scientists and institutions to reveal the most complete understanding of where, when, and how we need to act across the hemisphere to protect our migratory birds. So for MBI's work, which I will often refer to the Migratory Bird Initiative as, including the Bird Migration Explorer, we've had to consolidate data for a lot of migratory birds. We primarily, for the first phase, have focused on 458 species of birds. There are kind of 3 major buckets for the data that we've taken in. The first is tracking data. This is kind of the pathway data for birds, understanding more or less the exact pathways that they took, where they flew from. In order to do this, we had to reach out to many different individuals, researchers across many different forms of research, whether it be academia, governmental, NGO, and we consolidated for the Explorer over 13,000 tracks from over 9,000 individuals of 184 species of birds. So these are all the tracking data that you might think of when you put on a GPS device or a satellite transmitter or a light level geolocator. The next kind of major group of data that we use for consolidating and putting into our Bird Migration Explorer are our connectivity data. These include banding data, modus data, and genetic connectivity data. There's not many genetic data sets that we've used, but there's a few. This has resulted in over 4 million connections across 386 species. So you can see we're taking in a large volume of data to help build this Bird Migration Explorer. Then the final part is kind of the abundance and range data sets that we used to kind of create that component of the Bird Migration Explorer. The first part of that is getting eBird status and trend data, which we were gratefully provided by eBird and Cornell. So anybody that's provided eBird data, through your birding efforts, thank you. That data goes a long way towards research like this. So keep up your eBird checklists. And then the other type of data we've taken in is BirdLife International range maps, which helped form the basis of the range maps we use in conjunction with eBird data and expert review.
Chad, if I could just jump in with a quick question here to clarify. The question came up about modus. Maybe you could just quickly explain the basics of modus, since it seems like so many connections there.
Yeah, so modus, it's a series of towers. Modus is considered an automated telemetry array. So we often hear about modus stations going up. So when a modus tower goes up or a modus station goes up, that tower is able to pick up detects the birds that have had particular tags put on them, often nano tags from companies like Lowtech. And so as these birds are migrating past these modus towers, the modus towers are able to pick up that tag, and it's kind of like a ping. So it kind of says, okay, that bird was detected at this station. It's different than, say, a GPS device where you can see the actual flight paths of the bird. Modus is basically saying the bird was detected at station A, station B, etc. We can infer things like directionality at times. In some places, there's an array of towers put up that help with that. But in many ways, it's more like a connectivity type of detection versus an actual pathway. But it's hugely valuable. We at MBI have put up a number of towers as well to help with this research. And I'll touch upon a little bit more of that later. So, of course, all the work that MBI does is done through extraordinary partnership among science, conservation, and technology organizations. Of course, we've had hundreds of scientists, institutions, and agencies contribute their data to the Bird Migration Explorer. Here is a series of our founding partners. We like to say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it certainly takes a hemisphere to conserve our birds. And in order for the work that we do to be successful, it is in no small part thanks to many of the organizations that you see here. So, how does MBI work in practice? Well, Migratory Bird Initiative uses the science we have consolidated for conservation policy and engagement work. And the work we do falls into three interrelated buckets. One major area of work is using the bird migration science to create digital engagement tools like the Bird Migration Explorer, which I'll go into more in depth shortly, and then the live demo. The Bird Migration Explorer provides maps and information that help inform and influence decisions that benefits birds and drives grassroots engagement. It also helps researchers identify data gaps. Second major area of our work is our conservation applications work, in which we provide scientific support for Audubon's ongoing conservation work and strategic planning around conservation. And then the third part of our work in practice involves network engagement. This includes, working with our centers, staff, developing migration tools and educational programs, all derived from the data that we've taken in at the Migratory Bird Initiative. So here we are, the Bird Migration Explorer. So it is a one-of-its-kind interactive digital platform that combines different types of data from migration science to do three primary things. The first is to reveal the amazing journeys of our migratory birds. The second is to show how birds connect places and people across the hemisphere. And the third thing is to show the widespread challenges that birds are, of course, facing across their journeys, all of which I'll go into in more detail soon. We like to say that the Bird Migration Explorer was designed for two primary audiences in mind. The first are birders and the bird curious. I'm sure many of us here fall into that bucket, as well as conservation practitioners and advocates. And again, many of us also fall into that as well. So one of the flagship elements of the Bird Migration Explorer are its migration maps. These show us the places that birds use across their full annual cycle throughout the hemisphere to help improve hemispheric outcomes when it comes to conservation. These maps show a more complete picture of the important places birds use across the hemisphere, thanks to many of these different types of data sets being interlaid together in a way that's never been done before. These maps are also great for showing decision makers why policies like the Migratory Bird Protection Act and the Neotropical Migratory Bird Conservation Act need stronger federal support whenever possible. And finally, they reveal in clear detail the incredible journeys of our migratory birds. It is no wonder when you see these maps why they're the most clicked on element of our Explorer. I helped create these maps in many facets of my job, and every time I look at them, there is still something new to learn. And so when you see these in action, I think you'll be happy to have this tool at your side. The next element of the Bird Migration Explorer that we'll look into tonight is the location maps. These show the hemispheric impact of local actions and instill a sense of connection and responsibility for protecting places far away that our local migratory birds depend on. As our migratory birds are coming back this spring, many of us are aware that these birds are coming from far away. These connection maps help us understand that better, instill a sense of responsibility and stewardship, and illustrate the hemispheric impact or reach that our local threats or conservation solutions might have on these birds throughout their full annual cycle. And finally, for the Bird Migration Explorer, one of the final areas that we'll look into tonight will be our conservation challenge maps. So these provide advocates with data and maps to influence policies, perhaps at state, national, or even international levels. They combine weekly maps of bird distributions and abundance with the footprints of conservation challenges And this shows us where, when, and how birds are being exposed to human activities, how extensively they're being exposed as they migrate throughout the year. Now, one thing that's important to know is that these do not show actual impacts, but rather they show us the regions where we should be focusing on our conservation work. They show us exposure. Measuring impact is a much different thing, much more complicated. Many more factors have to go in, but this is a great way to see for our migratory birds, what are the conservation challenges that they're facing. And I will show you a little bit about that. But for now, in this example that's on here, we're looking at long-billed curlew, great shorebird of the American West. And this map shows that the exposure of long-billed curlew against anthropogenic groundwater depletion is pretty high in places such as California's Central Valley. These are areas that have a lot of water use, a lot of consequences as a result. And it's a map that shows us that if we do not manage these water uses properly, birds like long-billed curlew will face an uphill battle with their conservation. But it also shows us that if we manage things properly, such as doing bird-friendly agricultural practices, we could also benefit birds in these areas in the same type of way. So if you are on your computer, and forgive me while I look away, as I have this on a different monitor. So if you're on your computer, the Bird Migration Explorer is available through any online browser. You can access it through a computer. You can access it through things like tablets and iPads. We've also just produced a mobile version where you can look at the Bird Migration Explorer on your phone. It is not, however, an app that you might see, like, you put on your home screen and open an app like an eBird app or Merlin app, but it is an online platform. So as long as you have kind of internet or cell service, you'll be able to access this, whether it's on your phone or your computer. And you can go there by going to explorer.audubon.org or birdmigrationexplorer.org. It all kind of routes you to the same place. So when we come here, we're going to see that we are at our landing page, and I will orient you to a few different things. You will see across the top bar that you can access bird species, locations, or conservation challenges from anywhere in the website using that top bar, or on the home page here on the left. All of those things are also available to you with these orange buttons. There is an orange Take Action button if you want to kind of join Audubon's flock. And there are two ways to access kind of a expanded menu to learn more about the Explorer. You can do that on the bottom, learn more about the Explorer, located in blue, or what is referred to, as I've learned within the last year or two, the hamburger menu, the 3-barred menu. There is a place here where you can click about the Bird Migration Explorer. And I'll just show you that when you go here, you can learn all about the Bird Migration Explorer in detail. You can learn how to cite it if you use it for anything. You can learn who our supporters, partners are. Very importantly, you can learn about our data providers. We have all the institutions that have provided us data listed out, as well as all of the individual studies and data sets that we brought in. So everything that's in the Explorer, you can find here. Learn more about species migrations and things like connections and conservation challenges. Basically, the 3 main elements of the map: bird species, locations, conservation challenges. And of course, there's other information as well. So one thing I want to orient you all to is when you're using the Bird Migration Explorer, always remember that the Audubon logo in the top left is your home button. So if you click that, it'll take you back to our landing page. Now you're going to see a few things are ghosted out here at the moment. That's because we're trying to allow visitors to, when they come to the Bird Migration Explorer, to be able to decide if they want to turn all the data on, as it were. So if you click on the Explorer, hopefully you can see this pop-up that says Load Interactive Map. If you load this, it will kind of make this map that you saw that was static interactive. And this map here is showing us all the migratory journeys for thousands of individuals that we have put into our platform. Obviously, it takes a little while to load based on all the data, but each of these lines represents a different type of tracking method, different species, a different pathway. So as you hover through, you can see other things are popping up to tell you the species, to tell you the tracking device that was used. The map is dynamic, so of course you can scroll in. Everything will kind of take a second and resolve to a better resolution. And you can continue your journey as you go through that. Now, one thing I want to say, and my computer's running a little slow tonight. It has been all day, so it usually runs a touch quicker. Is on all of our maps, you're going to see this map layers panel in the right, top right. This allows you to turn different features on and off. So in this case, you can turn off the migration pathways for different groups of birds. Here I'm leaving our waterfowl tracking data on. If you want, you can turn on just the raptor tracking data. And you can see all of those as they are. You can also always, when it comes to our map layers, besides turning things on and off, you can show descriptions. And this will give you a written description of that layer that you're seeing. Now, one thing I want to point out as we're looking at this map, that all of us at the migration, doing the migration work we do at MBI and others, what's really amazing is that as you look at all these pathways coming together, you're actually able to see many of the features that make up, the environment of North America. So as you're going through, if you were to take that base layer away through the Americas, the map, as it were, you would be able to see more or less the outline of North America. You would be able to see some of the major ridges, some of the major migration corridors, major rivers. And it's really, really just a fun thing to see in action. It really helps tell a picture about our migratory birds. So on any map, we'll have the map layers panel, which we can expand and collapse, turn things on and off. Then there's also a data providers panel in the bottom right. So when you're in here, you can see no matter what map you're using, you can see what the data were that were making up the map that you're looking at. So this data providers panel is dynamic. So when you go to a different species map, for instance, it will only show you the data that is available and being shown. Okay, so we'll go to our bird species maps to start. So this is kind of the maps that many of us love. Now, when you come here, you'll see that there are some featured species that we've kind of queued up that you can look through. You can also look through our 458 species that we put into our platform. All of the species are, we're using illustrations from David Sibley, which are also on our online field guide. This is currently sorted alphabetically. You have the option to also sort it taxonomically if you're, taxonomically minded. And then, of course, you can filter out through many different ways to see what species we have. And of course, all the species that have been tracked, that's saying that they've had a tracking device put on them, such as a GPS device or a satellite tag. That's what that means. It means that that species has some type of tracking data on our maps. I will caution you to know that, despite all our best efforts, we don't take in all the available tracking data that's out there in the world. There's just too much. Many of it's still going to publications. Some researchers don't want to share it for whatever their reasons may be. So if a species says it is not tracked, that doesn't necessarily mean it hasn't been tracked by science. It just means that for the explorer's purpose, there's no tracking data that's being shown. So you can filter down through all your basic taxonomic groups if you want to see different species that way. You can go by your location, what species are available to show where you live. You can show what kind of technologies have been used. You can look at their conservation statistics. So what's their climate vulnerability? You can filter down that way. You can filter down by global population size. And of course, you can also filter down by which conservation challenges are out there, and you'll see a list of the species that are impacted by those. So one of the things that I think is also great is you can also do a search. So if you know what species you want to see right away, you don't need to scroll through. So Phil mentioned, broad-winged hawk, right? This is one of my favorite maps, and also it just helps because I was able to be peripheral to some of the work that the Harris Center was doing with researchers out of Hawk Mountain, some of the broad-winged hawk trapping. So as this map is going along, you're going to see a few things. There's a lot of information on the left, which I'll talk about soon. And most importantly, we're going to be seeing these migrations happening in front of us. So this map is movable. You can move it around, you can pan it, you can zoom in. I'll do all of that in a second. But for now, I'll pause the map. There's a time slider on the bottom. So you can pause or play. I'll let you know that whatever week of the year we are in real life, that is the week of the year that the map starts on. So you can see where your migratory birds are at this time of year. You can move this slider, you can grab it, and move it left and right, backwards and forwards in time as you see fit. You can expand the bounds of this slider so you can see across spring migration, across that period of spring migration, in this case, where are broadwings, basically through their migration period. And of course, that's a wide range of the Western Hemisphere. So that's something that you can do. You can, of course, replay it. But what I want to take a moment to do is to show you the elements of this map that make this up. So turning off some of these features, we'll add them back in. First off, we have our species range by season. We have summer, winter, and year-round ranges. We do not have migration periods, as you might see in some field guides. We have abundance of the species. So whatever week of the year the map is showing you, these brown hexagons are showing you what the abundance is of broad-winged hawks relatively for that area. These are all derived from eBird status and trend models, abundance models. So again, this is all your eBird data coming into play. And of course, as the map is moving through in motion, you will see that the abundance changes because the birds are migrating out of areas becoming less common. So basically, if you want to think about it, these brown hexagons are kind of like population levels of birds moving. They're not individual birds. They're just kind of the abundance of the birds moving through time. On top of this layer, we can start adding in the different types of tracking data. So there are low precision data points that we can add in. Not every map has those. Those are usually things that are tracked by light level geolocators. Light level geolocators have a wide range of precision, sometimes 75 kilometers, 150 kilometers. Those are broad movements. Many of our passerines, our songbirds, are tracked with these devices. Then there's the high precision tracking devices. These are things like GPS units, satellite tags, PTT tags, Argos tags. And of course, many of our raptors are tracked with more higher precision devices because they're larger. They can handle the weight of a larger battery, a larger backpack. And that's what many of these birds are here. Now, the birds that were tracked through the partnership with the Harris Center and Hawk Mountain, we've gotten Hawk Mountain broad-winged hawk data in, but these are not on our map yet. They haven't been shared with us. But many of you have probably seen some of those static maps of where birds are in time. And then the other element you can add in is kind of this journey of a tracked bird. These are kind of like ghosted pathways. So as the birds are moving through, they stay up and you can see kind of the footprint of their migrations as they go through. So I'll put this in play again. And we can see, right, that these birds are migrating up into eastern North America, west of the Great Lakes, and then funneling through down through Central and then into South America. Now, if you look at some of these ghosted pathways, the footprints, you can see that some of these birds are migrating outside of what is thought of as the known range of these birds. So this is showing us that perhaps the wintering range of broadwing hawks is more expanded than previously known. Again, the brown hexagons are the abundance of these birds migrating through. These birds, they're seen at places like Pac-Monadnock, they're seen at places like Hawk Mountain, Corpus Christi, Veracruz River raptors. And of course, nothing beats seeing those birds by the hundreds, the thousands, the hundreds of thousands in real life. But this is a great way to see how these birds are moving through in time. And you can really dial in and understand what the migratory pathways are. So when you look on the left, you're going to see a few things. You're going to see a short kind of bio about the bird. These come from our online field guide. You can click on conservation statistics. So if you're interested in that, that's available. You can click on related stories. In this case, there's a story that I wrote about broadwing hawk conservation and why tracking is important. And the Pac-Monadnock hawk watch is mentioned, I believe, as well as some of the research that's being done in the Monadnock region. And then, of course, for the species, you can see different maps, and we'll touch on those in a second, as well as related links. So this is a great way to see, our birds and how they migrate. I'll show you another example, show you another kind of bird that you can find within the Monadnock region that has a great map. These are bobolinks. And as you'll see on this map, there are some high precision maps, but there's tracking devices, sorry. There's also some of these low precision ones, these purple ones. So these are ones that are being tracked by things like light level geolocators. And so you can see that there's a feature that gets turned on that says gap in tracking data. So light level geolocators are a funny device. They're really amazing with what they can do. They basically use the amount of light that's happening, for how long, where solar noon is, and you can use that information to triangulate where on the Earth the bird is through some analyses. But there's times of the year where that doesn't really work too well, and the equinox periods is one of those periods. So as the birds are migrating through during the equinox period close to the equator, we kind of don't know exactly where they go. And so this is what this gap in tracking data indicates when it kind of becomes faded out. It's just showing that we're less certain with where these birds are. So that's just one thing to note, and that's why I chose this map to show you, because of the different type of tracking devices that have been deployed. But again, a really amazing species, long distance migrant, going all the way down into kind of central southern part of South America. Another thing that's really interesting about these maps, if you look, is you can see things like the wintering range. Look at how compact that is compared to the overall breeding range. And that helps us understand about the conservation challenges these birds might face. If something were to happen in those wintering grounds, a large portion of bobolinks that breed across a wide range of the US and Canada might be impacted. And it was through tracking devices on things like Swainson's hawks, seeing where they go, that helped researchers understand why they were declining for a period of time across the American West. And it's because in part of South America where they were going, that they identified, they later found that there was things like high pesticide and rodenticide use in those areas. So looking at these maps just gives you an ability to kind of think about that in a new way. So those are our bird species maps. Really hard to pull myself away from that, but we are short on time. The next is going to be our locations maps. These are going to be showing us how birds connect us across the hemisphere. We have a whole series of featured locations that we teed up for you if you want to explore that. Many have conservation stories tied in, many have very beautiful maps. But you can also search for a location. And so I'll search for Hancock, New Hampshire. We'll see what this map looks like. And so what this map is showing us, Hancock is falling into one of these hexagons that you can see that's lit up, as would be other places nearby. And it's showing you through birds that have been banded, through birds that have been tracked, how Hancock, New Hampshire connects to other places across the hemisphere from birds. So you can see on the left here, you can see where birds travel from your chosen location. You can see the country, how many species that is, and how many individual birds have been banded or tracked. Of course, the US and Canada makes a lot of sense. You know, as you load the countries, you can go all the way down and see that some Hancock birds, if you want to think about it like that, or birds that pass through Hancock, are connecting you to places like Uruguay, El Salvador, French Guiana. So it's really amazing to see how we connect to these places. Now, you can click and see conservation sites near your chosen location. You can see what Audubon sites are near here through the national network. So there's a lot of ways to kind of think about conservation at that site. As you zoom in, you can also see that you can select secondary sites from your location. So in this case, you know, if we want to go down to southern Florida, we can click here and it says that Hancock is connecting to Miami through 57 tagged birds of 11 species. And so you can see what some of these birds are. Now, I know Phil and some others might look at this list and say, oh, I don't know what about grasshopper sparrows or great egrets and things like that? Inevitably, there are some things that come in that scratch your head on a little bit, but these are things that come through with the tracking data sometimes. It's new discoveries or from bird banding. That's hard to tease apart sometimes. But you can see some of the conservation sites here, right? So here, you know, you look at Hancock. Well, Hancock is connected to places like the Everglades or Big Cypress Swamp watershed through birds. So when you hear about these places coming up and we need conservation and we need action, these types of maps can really help you understand how your local place connects to those places that are being called up. Yeah, so it's really great. It's really wonderful. You can go down and see that, you know, there's birds all over that your region is. So the final maps that I'll show are our conservation challenge maps. So we have 19 conservation challenges that we've loaded in. These again shows the footprint of select human activities and environmental change across the hemisphere, how they intersect with birds. We've broken these down into some of the major conservation challenges that you might think, such as residential and commercial development, energy, product mining, energy production, energy mining, transportation and services, human intrusions, you know, all the major things that are kind of a challenge for birds. And we were very purposeful to not say threats, because sometimes some of these things, they're opportunities, right, for us to save birds. And we wanted to look at it as more of a challenge versus just threat, although many of them are falling strictly as a threat. So one of the ones that I really like to look at, I think it should be on everyone's radar this time of year, is light pollution. So here's our light pollution map. This is kind of showing you all of the available hexagons that we have where light pollution is a challenge. And you can see, you know, it's kind of all scaled out, but you can see it's a low challenge or a very high challenge. And not surprising, many of these places, you know, across the eastern seaboard, the Great Lakes, are high challenges when it comes to our migratory birds. You know, I think Chicago was recently listed as one of the deadliest cities for migratory birds due to light issues. So, you know, you can go to a certain place and, you know, you can click on this area and it might tell you what are some of the species that are being impacted by light pollution. So let's see, go down. Another one of my favorite birds to look at is black-polled warbler this time of year. Another great migrant. I haven't seen any yet. I did have some Cape Mays in my yard today, so black-polled shouldn't be too far behind. So here's our black-polled warbler light pollution conservation challenge map. And so what this is showing you is across time, the exposure level of blackpoll warblers to light pollution as they're migrating through. Again, there's a slider on the bottom. You can pause it. You can slide it left and right. And I'll pause it here just so you can focus on maybe what I'm saying. And you can see this histogram. You can see the spring migration. Light pollution is a big problem. Birds are migrating right through many of our metropolitan areas in the spring. The same is true for the fall migration period. Now, when you start getting down into things like wintering time or the summertime, when blackpolls are way up in latitude or high elevation, light pollution isn't so much of a threat. So you can see what that looks like. You can go through all the conservation challenges for different birds. And then on the left here, there's this kind of conservation challenge map. It says 8 conservation challenges. So that's 8 conservation challenges for blackpoll warbler. You can go back to there and you can see the list of all the conservation challenges for that species. So, you know, you might want to look at urban areas, for instance. And so you can see that the histogram is a little bit different, but you can see the regions where it's popping up a little bit more for blackpoll warbler, which makes sense in some of our major cities. So these are the 3 main elements of the Bird Migration Explorer. I'm going to go back to the presentation, just a couple slides to wrap up. So this map that I showed you at the start of the Bird Migration Explorer, this migration journeys map, as we call it, you know, comprises more than 9,000 birds. If you see here, this is where we've overlaid this with some chapter boundaries for Audubon. So it's showing you that Audubon, it's a local thing that's everywhere and can provide a lot of assistance for migratory birds across the US. But this is just Audubon. It could be any small organization that is bird-minded, bird-curious. Certainly organizations like the Harris Center. And this is just kind of another map showing some more. Of course, you know, Audubon has some nature centers and sanctuaries. So again, just showing you how our migratory birds are, you know, they may be hemispheric in their journeys, they may be hemispheric in their challenges, you know, and all the things that they do, but so much of it is local, and we have such great impact on our local birds. So how can you get involved? Well, the first thing is to contribute data if you can. Many of you, I expect, aren't putting tracking devices on birds, but if you are a birder and you use eBird, continue to use your checklists and submit those, whether it's online or through the app. Those data are extremely helpful for us. Use the Explorer, engage, you know, fellow members of the Harris Center, people that, you know, might be conservation minded or have influence over conservation decisions. Dive into the Explorer, come up with a question, show them how birds in your area are being potentially impacted. And of course, if you do use the Explorer for any of these things, definitely come back and let us know. It's definitely helpful for us to have use cases. So that's very helpful. And then, of course, if you have any way, you know, to share this, like a program like this elsewhere, let me know. We're happy to do other webinars or possibly even trainings. So you can become what we call a chapter champion. That's a Audubon thing, but conservation champion would work just as well. So there's many ways to get involved, but the main ones are use eBird if you can, and share this Explorer with others and let us know how it goes. So I know that's a fire hose of information, a lot about the Migratory Bird Initiative, certainly a little bit, but not all of it. We do a lot of research and analyses and some really cool science, but also the Bird Migration Explorer, there's a lot there. Here's some information that you guys might want to take down if you're interested, such as our email address, which is migratorybirds@audubon.org. Of course, you can go to the birdmigrationexplorer.org for the Explorer. And I failed to mention during the presentation, but our Explorer is also entirely in Spanish, and you can go there at exploreaves.org or by changing your language preference at the top of the Explorer. So that's what I have. I happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Wow, Chad, that's really impressive, the work that you've been doing for several years now. And what a fantastic new tool. I can see a lot of application for professionals in the field, as well as amateur naturalists, birders. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of response from folks using this. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting a little more time to dive into this after the busy migration season winds down here, and we can start looking at some of these maps and coming up with some of our own questions. Yeah, so excellent resource. The interactive maps are really exciting to see how those landscapes do connect the birds, and vice versa, how we're all connected by the birds across landscapes. So great to see what on a small scale, an organization like the Harris Center can contribute in a small way and contribute to a big picture of a full life cycle conservation strategy for a species, for example. So yeah, really impressed, and I think a lot of folks are here. We got a couple of questions that came in, and let me throw one at you here. The first one, Elaine commented that she noticed on the map that how the water birds were generally hugging the coastlines, and the land birds often went over the oceans. Maybe you could explain a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, migration strategies across birds are pretty variable, and with a question like that phrased that way, it does kind of make you think about, does this really make a lot of sense? There's a lot of research out there about where migrations evolved from, where birds species came from, and perhaps thinking about things like recessions of ice age, of ice shelves, during the ice age going away, how land masses change. There's a lot of things that come into play with this. Yeah, so I think what it is probably for our water birds, many of them are probably using features like our coastlines as kind of markers, right, to help them with some of their migrations. Many of the water birds that we have on our Explorer, they're not truly seabirds. We don't have any seabirds yet on our Explorer, like true seabirds, like alcids, like puffins or shearwaters. It's requires a whole new way of mapping and dealing with some data challenges with how we visualize it. So they're not on yet. So many of these birds are kind of near shore birds, near shore, not shorebirds, near shore birds. So things like, cormorants and things like that. Whereas, many birds like songbirds or shorebirds like American golden plovers, they have really fantastical migrations out over the ocean. These birds, take several days, obviously, if you're migrating out over the ocean, sometimes nonstop. But these birds are migrating at night. They're using celestial bodies to help them migrate. They're using kind of the position of the sun to help them orient. And it's a great way to migrate short distances compared to going directly over land sometimes, and helps them avoid predators as well. So,
but what about the blackpoll warbler?
Yeah, well, the blackpoll is
that migration route.
Yeah, you'll have to ask my colleague Bill DeLuca that. He's a blackpoll specialist. Yeah, those birds, they've done research, right? These birds, some of them coming out of places like Denali, they make huge migrations east before they go out over the ocean. They're not necessarily coming out of Denali and doing a southeast journey. Some of them are making more easterly journey to get to the coast before flying down. And so, maybe that also points to things like where the origin of that migration came from, and it stayed imprinted as the species expanded westward. Good questions.
Well, what's fascinating about that to me is that there's so many more questions than we have answers, it seems like, with all of these species. So putting it all together in one map.
And we have 184 species that have been tracked on the Explorer. that's out of the 458 migratory birds we put on the Explorer. There's a lot of birds that just haven't been tracked yet or haven't been tracked across their full range. Different populations have different, connectivity to different places, different migration pathways. So there's a lot of opportunity to learn more, either through more devices being put out, being more strategic with the ones we use. There's certainly way more questions than answers.
Mm-hmm. Tom has a question about, is there data that shows the migration timing differences of males versus females? Is that something that can be explored?
Well, I mean, all of the birds that are tagged, go through a standard banding process, almost certainly, and whenever possible, birds are aged and sexed. So, that alone indicates that there are probably a lot of data out there that shows the differences between males and females. We actually haven't really collated that or done anything with that in our work. But there is some research out there that shows some of these differences in timings. We learn that some species, males or females, migrate first. We see this at banding stations, where birds coming through will be primarily, say, males in the beginning. We think about hummingbirds, perhaps, where females are doing the primary, rearing of the young. Males are heading out first. Females will come later. So we do see some of this in our banding. But I would say that, as a whole, there's still a lot to learn about female birds in all realms of kind of bird biology. It's kind of a bias that many researchers are starting to push against and to try to learn more about the females of the species as well.
Yep. Okay, well, we're at 6:30. I just wanted to leave it with one more comment that came in. I believe this was from, Jocelyn. Jocelyn mentioned she can see this app, I can see teachers using this app to connect children near an overwintering site to children near a breeding site. And maybe some teachers are already using this for those applications, but maybe you're getting that kind of feedback, like something like a sister city or school concept.
I think that's a really wonderful thought. And I will say that as part of my work, I've recently been working with colleagues who kind of work through our Audubon Adventures kind of program, which is all for young kids. And we're actually trying to develop some curriculums, maybe not the right word, but we're trying to develop some programs and some opportunities for teachers to work with young kids using the Bird Migration Explorer as a tool. So it's something we're actually putting some time in now to see what we can do for that. There's going to be some resources online. So if anybody has young kids or is a teacher, check out Audubon Adventures. You should be able to find some stuff there. Just great stuff, if it's not about the Bird Migration Explorer yet. And we're also working with our centers, hopefully soon, and trying to incorporate some of this stuff for young explorers to take on when they visit our chapter centers and sanctuaries.
Well, fantastic, Chad. Thanks for all your work on this, and great resource. And the Harris Center is definitely going to be making use of this site, yeah, looking forward to diving into myself. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening and enjoy bird migration this spring. Thank you so much for your attention, and Chad, thanks for presenting here. Yeah, happy spring migration, everybody.